Hello and welcome to the channel. This is a special live. I've been wanting to set this up for some time now. I have a couple of guys here who know way more about the Iron Age than I do, and they're going to kind of come on here and it's just going to be a chat about all things indie, all things publishing, and we're going to see what it's all about. And I'll let Richard introduce himself.
Hello. Well, I'm Richard. I run IronAge.media as well as Anvil Magazine. These are both entities that basically focus on indie, specifically non-woke indie of all different mediums and genres. So the website will cover everything from novels and comics to some people are even making movies out there, and to a certain degree games. Haven't gotten as much into that. The magazine is a collection of short fiction, art, and comics from indie creators. And right now the issue number 4 is funding. So if you want to check that out, you can find that in my Twitter or whatnot. I'll drop a link at some point in time.
Awesome. Yeah, feel free to drop that in there. And we also have John with us today.
Thank you for having me. I very much appreciate it. I'm John A. Douglas. I am an independently published author. I'm the author of epic fantasy novel The Black Crown, which is available now, and a proud member of the Iron Age, in so much as it is sometimes considered a group, but I'll explain a little later. I don't necessarily see it so much that, more of the era that we're in. If you want me to expand on that right now or later.
You can definitely expand on it. I love the way the first time I heard about it, the way you kind of described it. So yeah, describe it for everybody out here who hasn't heard of it.
Well, for the uninitiated, the term wasn't even coined by me or the person that I got it from, which was YouTuber and fellow indie author Razorfist. He ended up making the term and I kind of latched onto it because, to me, describing what we're in as the Iron Age of entertainment kind of summed up the pro indie approach I was already taking. So, you know how you have those moments where you just kind of you're in this kind of particular vibe or groove, and somebody puts a name to it, and you're like, that's it. That's the name for the thing I was already doing. And so, me, like a lot of others who were kind of inspired when Razorfist coined the phrase, kind of took up that flag and started to run with it. For the uninitiated, the Iron Age, we basically call it that as the age that we're in, which is being more pro indie and more divested away from mainstream entertainment. That's, from my perspective and a lot of others, has just been extraordinarily disappointing, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, where their shift has gotten away from entertaining and compelling good storytelling and more towards entertainment that's filled with more messaging and trying to shovel things around rules that get put up in the writer's room. And to me, that's restrictive and uncreative. So I was already kind of divesting myself from mainstream entertainment a few years ago, before this term even popped up, and I started to dive into indie fantasy, and I have not regretted that decision since. And when Razorfist, kind of brought that term into popularity, I'm like, yes, this is what I've been doing. And, I just kind of ran with that. I ended up running across Royce from A Drink with Crazy, who I wish he was here. I'm not going to call him what I called him on Twitter on your channel. I don't want your channel to get taken down. Try and be a nice guest here. But Royce was very similar in that he decided to use his channel more to help promote others who were in the indie spaces that were kind of taking up the Iron Age flag and running with it as well, and putting a spotlight on them. I started doing something similar on my YouTube channel, where I stopped trying to kind of get involved in a lot of the pop culture commentary and shifting towards signal boosting independent creators, independent authors like yourself. You were on my channel not that long ago.
Yeah.
And it's become a really I know a lot of people like to equate it to a movement. Hey, BA, a movement kind of similar to Comicsgate. I really don't see it like that, because it's really just decentralized entertainment, being pro indie, pro decentralization, so that there's no figurehead, there's no one place to go to for all of it. The hashtag Iron Age is more just a little way so we can kind of occasionally find each other and support, kind of help support each other. And that's something that, especially in the indie author space, has worked out extremely well in the last few years. A lot of it centered around the folks who are doing the booktuber thing, and a few websites and blogs in particular. Yeah. But to me, it's just a celebration. It's just a celebration of independent works, and we call it the Iron Age because, unlike the Silver Age of comics or the Golden Age of TV, we may not have the funds to be all nice and pretty, but we are stronger because we're doing all the work ourselves. We are cutting out a lot of the middleman that comes from the mainstream entertainment, where you have people between the creators and the audience. With the proliferation of so much social media and the ability of people to reach directly to the audience, we have the tools right here, in our grasp to make what we want and sell it directly to the people. And we end up being our own marketers, our own platforms, our own infrastructure, and in many cases our own economy.
That's very true. Richard, so you got the namesake there, the Iron Age Media. So what does Iron Age mean to you?
Okay, well, going back in the initial rant that popularized the term Iron Age, Razorfist asked, who's going to run the non-woke IGN, and who's going to basically create some of these ecosystems that are necessary for like a community to become more of, I don't necessarily want to use the term movement in the way that it's frequently used with like political affiliation, but kind of in terms of like a consumer movement, where consumer behavior changes and there's actual there's websites and resources and reviewers and whatnot for people to get into the niche, and for that niche to grow beyond potentially just being a niche. And I took that, or I heard that, and I listened. I went, I was working on another project at the time, and then a month later, nobody had done anything. So I was like, I'll try it. And that's where the website came from. It was Iron Age Media, because ironage.com is incredibly expensive.
I bet.
Yeah, .media extension was cheap. So that's kind of where things got started. But, back then I was talking specifically kind of about the fact that the ability to reach consumers is still very constrained, but the ability to produce content has never been easier in a lot of ways. Like, with the individual creators have much more capability to do it all than they ever have before, thanks to technology. And the goal for the website was to help connect these different like small groups, whether it be kind of like the Pulp Rev community, or like Comicsgate or whatever else. There's overlap between these customers, even if not everybody who reads comic books wants to read novels. There's still overlap to some degree within the customer base. And my sort of threshold for like what do I want to feature here, it's people who are putting quality over ideology. So generally speaking, I'll use Blaine Lee Pardoe as a good example here, because he's a very prolific author. He was canceled a few years ago from the franchise that he'd been writing for a long time, and he went ahead and released a series that he's wanted to write for a while, and called Land and Sea. It's kind of a military sci-fi um, series. He's got a short story in issue 4 of Anvil. Don't miss it. But anyway, shilling aside, that I love that. I want to cover it. I will write about it on the website. He also has a series called Blue Dawn. Actually, I don't know if that's the entire series name, but the first book was called Blue Dawn. Now, Blue Dawn is about sort of like a left-wing takeover of the United States, and it's very, very political. I generally wouldn't cover that on the website, for example, even though it's same author, largely the same thing. It's just, it would be very hard to argue that that's not primarily ideological. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
you know, I also, I have always said from the very beginning that the website is my slice of the Iron Age. If other people want to go out and start trying to build up their own things, I'm not going to try and run people off. Now, if somebody were to try and say like Rebel Moon is Iron Age, I'd be like, no. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know if I need to argue that, but if I need to explain my thought process to why not, I'd be more than happy to. So
okay, so I delving in, I've been diving into more Iron Age videos and content, and so I guess it would seem, now feel free to tell me if I'm wrong, you guys are more of the experts than I am, all people inside of what we would call the Iron Age are indie or self-published, but not all indie or self-published are Iron Age?
I think that's probably fair to say. I am not generally somebody who runs around trying to dictate who the label applies to and who doesn't. You know what I mean? But I think that a defining feature of the Iron Age ethos is that you're wanting to retain that direct to consumer connection. You're not looking to enter into the traditional apparatus as much. Now, I would say if you are, for example, producing a comic series, and then you end up making like an animated series, and then you're doing this and somebody approaches you with the desire to distribute that on like Rumble through like a Rumble exclusive or something like that. You know what I mean? Try to do some paid tiers, doing something like that. Then I kind of wonder, you know, there's no middleman. You're still handing off distribution. I think that's probably an argument to be made, but I don't necessarily define it in terms of like a dollar amount success or something like that. You've made this much money, you're no longer indie. It's more like, are you independent from having a like have you retained creative control
Are
of the
you
property?
answering to somebody? That's kind of
how
because I
are you still answering to your customers first? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've watched like Eric July for the last couple of years now, and right before I started watching him, I think right before he started creating, you know, ISOM, and it kind of blew up, and that was you know, that's been a big debate, you know, on his channel. I know of like, well, what is considered indie or what's considered self-published? Is it like if you work with a small press, are you still indie or not? You have to do it all yourself. Is distribution the key? You know, I mean, think about like myself. I can, you know, I'm self-published. I consider myself indie. I mean, I do have to publish through KDP and, you know, Amazon, but you know, I'm still in 100% control. And I don't know about you, John, but like I've had people ask me in the past, you know, it was like, well, did you send out query letters and stuff to place? I didn't even attempt it. I did.
Yeah.
I knew all about it. I knew how to. I knew the templates, but I didn't want to because I knew I could get my stuff to customers faster. I could choose my own cover. You know, I had pretty much total control, and that's why I went the route I went.
Right, and I made the same decision when I was starting to work on the Black Crown, and I was going, "This is the one that I've written a couple of half novels, and there's a couple of bad ones that ended up getting flushed down the toilet where they belong." When I decided that this is the one that's going to go, and I was trying to think, well, okay, I gotta go through the process of applying to. Speaking of which, there's Blaine. Good to see you, sir, and that's a very good point too. I made that same decision when I discovered how prolific self-publishing had become. I thought to myself, do I want my work to die in the slush pile and rot there, waiting for the approval of someone else? To me, retaining your own creative control is almost more important than having to bow down to a higher power just because they have the higher dollar, they have the distribution, they have a lot of those things, and that's all well and good. But there's a lot of examples that prove that you don't necessarily need those. Eric July is one. On the indie fantasy side of things, I keep mentioning this guy constantly. It's Ryan Cahill. Look at where he's at, and he took everything. He learned how to. I remember his interview with Beard of Darkness, where he talked about he didn't know how he wanted his own website a certain way. He learned how to program his own website. He learned how to do all the formatting. He learned how to do everything at every step of his indie career and made it his own. And so, he's got no one to thank for his success other than himself and his fans. And that's to me the absolute epitome of what the Iron Age is. It's you and your customers. You have what they want, and you build up the fan base that likes what you write. And as long as you keep providing that unfailingly, they'll come back to you. Blaine is still a success, even though he's not attached to the big name series that he was involved with for over 30 years. And now he's building up something that's about to take off with more graphic novels and its own tabletop RPG, the Land and Sea series.
What I actually do want to explore this comment a little bit more, but you mentioned Ryan, and he's an awesome example. And the example I love to use all the time is Will White. I mean, he's literally about to create an anime from his self-published book. I mean, that is tremendous. And he knows his customers, he knows his fans, he stays interactive with them. Every week he's got something going on. And I always point to him. I'm like, and Craig Allenson also. But it's like, you can do this. You just have to find your people, find the people who like what you like to write, and don't screw the fans over, basically, like the mainstream companies have in the past. I'm not too familiar with the Comicsgate versus Iron Age.
I can explain that, Richard, a little more. That's more of an extension of a feud within indie comics that kind of stretched into. It's not so much on the novel side of things, but it's a lot of personalities that are going at each other on Twitter. It's not really a thing. There's some people that are involved in the feud between Ethan Van Sciver and Eric July that tried to make it a thing, but there's not really that kind of a animosity or vitriol on the Iron Age side. We're way less interested in drama streams and drama farming and things like that. We're much more interested in promoting, at least helping promote each other's projects and books, comics, what have you. So I'm with Blaine Lee Pardo, what he's saying in the chat, that it's best not to get involved or take the bait that there is some kind of a feud between the two, because there really isn't. And there's so much overlap trying to force it into tribes, and tribal warfare would just be nonsensical and self-destructive. And Iron Age has never been about being self-destructive towards others.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
To kind of, I was going to say, to kind of expand off that, I would say that there's something I think John touched on in his first kind of explanation of what the Iron Age was. And that is a sense of figuring it out, working through it. You know what I mean? We're not hiding away, trying to craft the perfect thing that then later we're going to, try and enter into the mainstream or whatever else. Like I was saying, there's to me, a sense of being tired of just talking about um, the mainstream media properties and complaining. Not that you have to be totally, ignorant to these things and you can't ever talk about them, but I find that a lot of the Iron Age media or the Iron Age culture is much more focused on, creating and, um, you know, I guess to a certain degree networking, but it's not as much interested. I feel like a lot of previous movements have remained focused on what's going on in the mainstream at the time, and
Yeah.
there are a few people I would say, I mean, and even on like the live stream I do with the Royce Iron Age Nights, occasionally we'll talk about something that's come out of the mainstream recently, and just kind of in the process of idle banter with our guest, but like you just don't see as much analysis of, for example, let's go back to Rebel Moon. Uh, I think that maybe I've seen one or two people talking about it, but only in passing. You know what I mean? Whereas a lot of other communities will sit down and they will deconstruct what's wrong with that. And that's fine. But I just don't think that's culturally as in tune with what a lot of the creatives who describe themselves as Iron Age. So
We're much more of in the belief that, whereas let me back up for a second. There's a lot of, say, YouTubers, bloggers, and personalities online that have made their name essentially, kind of, commenting on everything that comes out of Disney, Marvel, Netflix, whatever looks like it's a culture, a part of the culture war dumpster fire. But we're much more interested in just kind of separating away from that. Okay, there's a lot of people online who say, I'm tired of hearing about the next Marvel movie sucks, and this is wrong with it and that's wrong with what. Give me something new. We have what's new. We have stuff that's new. What's independent. What's being crafted by creators who are saying, hey, if you don't like the way Star Wars is going, I wrote my own Star Wars here. If you want something to fill that void, I've got this. And there's a few indie authors who have kind of filled in that void where do you want something that feels like Game of Thrones and you're disappointed by Game of Thrones? And I've got this grimdark series over here, they say. And I found plenty of indie fantasy novels through BookTube, through Twitter, and just the indies in general. And to me, Iron Age is us making for ourselves. We're entertaining ourselves better than what mainstream is providing for us.
Yeah, that is what I kind of got from watching videos. It's all about, like, it seems to be we weren't getting what we wanted from traditional publishing or the big media companies. So we just created what we liked ourselves. And over the last, I'd say, 3 years or so, it just, people are gravitating more towards, indie, pretty much anything. Indie video games have kind of blown up over the last 5 years. The comic sphere, of course, with Eric July.
Yeah. Well, and I would say one of the things I almost made a video about, like, what is the Iron Age, and I ultimately kind of put it off for a bit. But to me, I think that the Iron Age culturally kind of started quite a while ago, and I think that if you did some research, you could find the concepts that drove this probably going back originally with music, the whole SoundCloud effect, like. Music is totally different. There really is no such thing as pop music anymore. I mean, there's stylistically pop music, but there is no popular music anymore. And the mainstream or legacy apparatus for music is just like totally different than what it used to be. And I would say the next step in that direction was probably the KDP Kindle Direct Publishing revolution around like the 2012-ish, I would say.
Yeah.
And to go along with that, there was also, you know, kind of like the Hugo Awards rebellion, what with Sad Puppies and whatnot, where a bunch of authors got together and were frustrated by that. Now, there's been, you know, some people have said that's failed, and including some of the people who started it, you know, and George R. R. Martin's written more words insulting the people who did it than he has on his novels, at least that he's published since then. But, you know, yeah, exactly. There's all these different ways to get to your consumers. And I don't necessarily like, there are some people who will say the independent media started with me, or it started here at this moment in time. And it's like, no, there's always been indies. What is different to me about the Iron Age is that there has been a consumer side of it as well. We don't just have like ultra niche creatives doing the thing where they create for other creatives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which there's nothing wrong with that, but that is unlikely to penetrate into the larger market, you know? And so it's the fact that those early adopters are starting to move closer to those creatives who are in their niches. And as those early adopters, it starts trickling down the line, you know? And obviously video games are another medium where that's very common.
Yeah. And like I've said this, you know, on my channel, you know, ad nauseum, but I am not a fan of modern day politics in my stories, in my fantasy, in my sci-fi. You know, I read, listen to get away from that. That's the, you know, it's escapism, you know, it is my, you know, why I love to read. And, you know, you'll get a lot of people like, well, there's always been politics. I'm like, yeah, but those are the stories that have really stood the test of time are your traditional politics. It's like, oh, the king doing this or that.
Well,
you know.
Yeah, and there's also a certain amount of like modern day that's being injected into things. What is the I heard somebody use this term and I went, that's perfect. And then I promptly forgot it. But the it's a film term, but it's whenever the music is being heard by the characters. So there's two kinds of music within a soundtrack of a movie, right? There's music or background audio from the soundtrack that only the viewer is hearing. You know what I mean? Like the Top Gun pilots are not hearing the Top Gun playing, right?
Rick Dillinger or whatever,
yeah. But when they're in the bar singing "You've Lost That Love and Feeling," that is, you know, and I'm blanking on the term right now, but that's, I would say, is one of the kind of big factors, is that a lot of media, and you know, we'll like we think about it in books. I think about it a lot in books because that's when, you know, that's one of my favorite mediums, but it's everywhere. It's a lot of these studios or creatives, even indies, got in the habit of putting the current day politics over top of whatever they were doing. So it's like the characters would just turn to you and offer a, you know, dear viewer, we think racism is bad, and therefore we think that the you know, generic insert bad guys, they're racist. You know what I mean? And we need to defeat them. Okay, listen, there are plenty, and these could be enemies that were, you know, killing children, and you know, it could be like a demon from beyond the veil, and they still need to make this demon is also racist. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, we get it. We probably think that, you know, the child mutilating aspect of it was bad enough, but why did you do this? You know what I mean? You've taken it out of me.
And part of the problem is, yes, there was politics in genre fiction in the past. The problem is, one, those authors were intelligent and they knew how to wrap those ideas around an interesting story to try and tell. Whether they succeeded or not, well, depends on how well the story was told. But then there's also the fact that, you know, they understood you had to entertain, because if you had something that was preachy and not entertaining, you know, it was going to flop. there's also the fact that the difference between the old school politics and the modern day politics is the modern day politics is oversaturated in every medium. We wake up, it's on TV, it's in movies, it's on all over social media, it's in comic books. You can't get away from it, and that's where it starts to sour the milk a little with entertainment, because people are looking for an escape from it, and people with the ideology of you should not have a comfort zone feel you need to be lectured even when you're trying to relax, and put you in a place where you cannot be comfortable. You cannot escape from the realities of the world. To me, that's a dangerous thing, because that has led to, and you can see it on social media, people who are perpetually miserable about the state of the world and feel that everything's got to be upended now because I don't feel good. And a lot of cases, you can go right outside your door and the world has not ended. Things are not as bad. And look, I don't want to see my politics. That's their other excuse. They say you just want to see your politics. No. I would hate my politics being reflected back at me even worse. I don't want a lecture. It's the same reason I don't really watch, like, say, I'm a Christian, but I don't really watch Christian media, a lot of the movies that come out of that realm, because most of them are preaching to the choir. And it's delivering me a message I already know. So there's not a whole lot of entertainment value in that for me. I want something that is very apolitical.
And to go back to what some Okie dude said, the speculative fiction, and I love speculative sci-fi. It's probably my favorite little niche of short fiction. There's a difference between asking a question and giving an answer, or asking a question and proposing an answer. You know what I mean? I think that a lot of current day media starts with the intent to give you the answer. And maybe you could say that's the same thing with like 1984 or Brave New World. But I to me, both of those, which are, highly political in their nature, and I think that they are exploring an idea
of what is
beyond. They're gaming something out. And I mean, I don't know if you don't want to. I don't know. I don't necessarily think that it's that big of a deal if you want to avoid that, like the overt political angle. It's not like you have to be. I'm just trying to decide if that's really an important factor in the Iron Age or not. You know what I mean? Like I said, with my website, I might not highlight something like Brave New World or 1984, just because I felt like it was primarily ideological. But again, that's just me and what's on my website. I kind of think that because the Iron Age is consumer driven, at the end of the day, the market is going to decide, what is deserving of attention,
And to add another point, Echoes in the chat said it well. That's another thing about politics in your stuff, is that when you put a modern day issue of any kind in your work is immediately dated.
Yes.
And it's not going to age as well. I mean, you go back and you look at how many of Matt Damon's movies about the Iraq War are beloved these days. They weren't even that great back then, but he made a bunch of those, and on the days of the Iraq War and environmentalism, and they didn't age very well at all. They weren't received well then, but they haven't aged all that well, because who wants to go back and relive the days of, watching the news about the Iraq War every day and the death count every day. And if if you weren't alive in that time, that doesn't mean anything to you either.
Well, I think the best, and if we're trekking into the movie section, like
just an example,
war movies that are great aren't political, like the Three Kings, one of my favorite Desert Storm movies, but it really is very little politics throughout the whole story. There's a little bit here, a little bit there, of course, but it's about the three men's journey through the war zone. It's a more personal story to be told.
I mean, is the piece of media about the characters? Is it about the plot, or is it about the politics?
Right.
You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, if it's about the politics, then it's I don't know. I would be inclined to say it's probably propaganda. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I just did
like I said, I'm not trying to be the arbiter, but I feel like, based on my understanding of what would define that kind of thing, that's my interpretation. I'm open to being argued about it. You know what I mean? But, and by the way, I looked it up. It's diegetic. Diegetic is the term for music or something that's being experienced by the characters, while you're also experiencing it. And non-diegetic would be when it's outside the frame of reference from the characters. So.
Yeah,
you know, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul were hearing that sound. They were hearing Duel of the Fates when they were fighting. Nobody fights that hard if you're not listening to that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, I just interviewed Jim Butcher, and a big thing on BookTube, and it's actually kind of fallen away a little bit, but it's still, when I first got on about 2.5 years ago, it was, everything was themes. What's the theme? What's the theme of this book? And it seemed to me a lot of times when they talk about what's the theme, it ended up being a book that was very political or very preachy, you know. And interviewing Jim Butcher, you know, he's my favorite author, and it did not surprise me in the least when I asked him about, well, what do you do when you're, you know, thinking about themes? He goes, I don't. He goes, I don't write themes. I write characters. I write people. And that is, you know, him and Sapkowski. I mean, Sapkowski's got tons of politics in The Witcher, but they're all timeless politics. It's all, you know, the one of destiny. We gotta get her so we can control the realm. And
yeah, you know, they're self-contained.
Well, I also think that I don't necessarily think that it's impossible or bad for an author to start with themes in mind. But I do think that that's a very difficult thing to do. You know what I mean? I think it requires a level of skill that might not always be there. So if, you know, like I said, with a lot of things, with the propaganda aspect of it, there's certainly pieces of art that are also propaganda. And I think that there's some people who would argue that that's impossible. But I tend to disagree. I think it's a matter of how much skill and finesse was put into it. You know, because there are certain things that will evoke emotion towards that idea that the creative was wanting to convey one way or the other. You know, or the patron. You know, you look at churches, old cathedrals, things like that. Individually, the pieces themselves are art, but they are obviously created with a intent behind the message. So I think that, I was going to say, I think that themes generally from authors, certainly newer authors, which is most of what I deal with. And actually, that's not always true. There's lots of authors who've been around for a long time, but are still working at it. But I think that themes are something that should be approached carefully. And it is far wiser to set out kind of a universal concept to the story, and then create the characters. And then if there's like more explicit themes that might be applicable to one thing or another, then maybe you can shine those up. But it again, if you start with it first, it sort of, I think, doesn't generally work as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys have watched any of her stuff, but when I first decided that I was going to get serious about my writing and I wanted to write a novel, I used to watch Jenna Morassi, and you know, she's big, you know, and she's fine for starters. Like if you're just starting out, it gives you ideas and kind of a little bit of structure. But having watched a lot of her videos, and then I read her book last year, you can see all of her. You can tell she started with certain things in mind, and that's why, I mean, the book was okay. I'm not one of these people that's just gonna bash on her book too bad, but going through the whole book, you can see, oh yeah, she made sure she put this type of person in and that type of person, and this person had to have this kind of a disability or whatever, because she, being super inclusive on purpose,
Yeah. Well, and my wife listened to her back whenever she first got started, like, whenever she first began kind of, I don't even remember when that was. That was probably like 2014 or something like that, So I heard some years ago that she was like, I just checked in on her and she's doing like the sensitivity reader and everything else. And it's like that's, I don't know. I think it's always
I have no
a
idea
very
who this
risky
is.
thing. Every person you put in between yourself and the person you're trying to communicate with whatever form of media you have, every additional layer that you add there, I think is something that should only be done very, very carefully.
Yeah, well, and like with her and people who write and write similar to her, it's like you kind of pigeonhole yourself and you push yourself into a corner because you're like, well, I got to get all these people, and maybe it doesn't make sense to have a certain person in a book, or a certain, or a person that has a certain ability or a certain problem, because that happens all the time. Like I'll read a book and I'm like, okay, I know why you put it in there, but it makes no sense. Like you're just you're pulling me out of the story. That was an issue I had with I believe it was The Wheel of Time. The first I was watching the first couple episodes and they get to this like valley, this village. And it is and like I said, I have no problem with diversity. There's as long as it's diversity with that makes sense. But it was the most diverse village in a mountain that I'd ever seen, and it was so diverse.
You mean the TV show? You mean the TV show?
Yeah, the TV show. It was so diverse that people's children didn't even look like them. I mean, I'm just like, I get it. Like in my first book, More Than a Vampire, we, the whole thing of it is, Dracula is 6,000 years old. He takes over, and becomes the head of vampires worldwide, and he wants to set up his own like kingdom, right, worldwide. So he goes and picks people from the four corners of the world, right? And so there is, one of the guys is one of his original vampires is a Maori warrior, right? But that makes sense because he wants to own that chunk of the world. He wants to have an influence there. He wants to have an influence in the Middle East, and he wants to have influences in, Northern Europe. So it all makes sense. But a lot of times it seems like they force it in, and it makes no sense that they did it.
I mean, you remember I had those tweets that went kind of viral last year around the entertainment sphere because I put four pictures up on my tweet. It was a picture from 4 different fantasy adaptations that were on TV that year. And I asked a simple question. I just made a simple statement. These are from 4 different shows. And you could kind of notice that they all looked the same, both in the ethnic makeup, but also in the costume design, the set design. They just seemed like there was no effort to try and make them distinctive from one another. And that's the interesting thing is, for as diverse as those shows were, they ended up being completely homogenous because their idea of, appealing to the modern audience is just make it look like Southern California. And for especially Wheel of Time, that little world here didn't make any sense.
If you have to add one thing, like let's say that you have a property, whether it be a fantasy, let's say that you have a Star Wars and you've got Lord of the Rings, right? And you go and you're like, all right, well, and the execs tell you, all right, well, to make this show, we need to add one thing. And whatever that thing is, it's the same between the two. And you go, okay, well, that's fine. They're still going to be, totally identifiable. But then you go back and they say, all right, well, actually, it's going to be 3 things. And it's like, okay, well, actually, it's going to be about 20 things. And then, like, there's only so much space in these different IPs. And at a certain point where you just look at it and you go, all right, well, they're just wearing a costume. This guy's wearing a wizard costume, and this guy's wearing, a spacesuit, but they're basically the same thing. And, nothing else matters. This is dumb. I'm just going to go find something else to do.
Well, and one thing, like an example I will bring up as far as diversity within fantasy or sci-fi is, and I understand, and I am all for like letting everybody play, right? Everybody should be able to be in the sphere and everything, but books themselves, individual books, don't need diversity at all to be great. Because I just read the Greenbone saga last year, and every single character in that book is basically Chinese. They're Chinese, Japanese, it's from Fonda Lee. Great. I've read pretty much everything she's done, and it was great. And nobody on BookTube, everybody loves it on BookTube. Not a single person had anything to say about not being it all being Chinese people, and that, and to me that kind of tells you two things. It's like, one thing, you don't need diversity, just write a great story and people will love it. Secondly, it's kind of weird that nobody said anything about it, so, but one thing I did want to ask you, Richard, is, John told me even before I kind of got onto your stuff, is that you've put out 3 magazines now.
Yeah, so we just shipped the third one back at the end of February, beginning of March, and I'm currently doing pre-orders for the fourth one. Anvil was started a year ago. It was kind of on a not exactly on a whim, but it was something where I went, I want to do more. Yeah, there's issue number 1.
Issue 1.
And I want to do more. I want to get some way, because short fiction is probably one of the things that I've always loved the most. And if you're going to do a flip through, let me do a flip through on number 3.
I'm trying to have a visual aid while you're talking.
Okay.
Issue number 3, by the way.
Because man, there's little formatting things in issue 1 where I'm like, but then Razorfist reached out to me about putting a preview of Ghost of the Badlands in issue number 1, and it blew up, and that was fantastic. Issue number 2, it has more comics and stories. It was just bigger and better. It had something I saw Eric Wag earlier. It's got a story in there from him. Got a whole variety of people in there. And then issue 3 actually has something from Mr. John A. Douglas.
Yes. No way.
A fun little piece of cyberpunk short fiction here. That was cyberpunk heist. So it's all different genres. The intent there was to kind of create an on-ramp for people who are wanting to learn about the Iron Age. And like one of the things that I've run into is people say, okay, well, but now what? I'm interested. I would like to potentially do some reading, but there's just this huge deluge of indie content that people. Yeah, there we go. Valiant Storm.
Hey,
there we go. John A. Douglas. Anyway, but there's a huge amount of content out there. It's like drinking from a fire hose. So it's I'm wondering about issue number 3. I'm sorry, Eric. I think that I need to follow up on what's going on, because everything that I sent to Canada is still sitting in Chicago, which is not great. But
thanks a lot, Chicago.
The purpose of Anvil is to provide an on-ramp. You're interested in indies. You want to get away from the mainstream, like you're not actually making your own choices. This is one thing that I'll say that kind of, I'm about to go on a short diatribe here. And that is that the average consumer, myself included, is incredibly lazy. We have gotten extremely pathetic about making our own decisions, generally speaking. We don't go out and try and find the coolest new sci-fi TV show, for example. We just turn on Amazon Prime or Netflix, and then they say, all right, this is the new thing within the sci-fi category. You have 3 choices. You don't have the dozens of choices that are out there.
It's Apple versus Android.
Pretty much. And
it's
so
like Android is always better, but you have to go out and find it.
Yes. And so there's a problem finding things. And so Anvil Magazine, part of the purpose there is to make it easier for consumers to navigate that transition. So, and it's all indie authors, and each story at the end has like a little blurb where you can go and find more of their work and everything else. So
that's amazing. I mean, and like you said, doing short stories gives people they can come in and just kind of taste with, the authors and the creators and be like, oh, this is a guy I mesh with, or this is a girl who writes something that I can get behind. And then, and then, like you said, you put the little blurb in there and they can find them. And then, you're off to the races. I think that's, you're giving people basically another platform that they can put their creatives work into.
Yeah. And like Ann said, it's like the lazy among us. All of us are incredibly lazy about our consumer choices these days. You know what I mean? It's just about, maybe we're less lazy about one or two things, but the reality is that we have had to become lazy about a lot of these things because the internet has made it that we now have too much information, to process all at once, all the time, continuously. So we have to offload our decision making to somebody, and that's where reviewers come in. Reviewers are obviously very important, and I encourage anybody who wants to go out there and talk about what they enjoy. And I think that we need more of that. It's not as popular as complaining about what you don't like, but I don't think that we're going to change anything by doing that. So the other side of that is that you have to kind of help create these on ramps for people who they've been listening to Friday Night Tights. They're like, okay, I don't really like anything that's coming out of the mainstream. It's cathartic, it's fun, it's good to have people come off of there, but now we need an on ramp somewhere else. At some point in time, you're going to want to start enjoying things again. So Anvil's trying to help you do that. And Iron Age Media, the website in general, that's the purpose of it as well.
So how often, I mean, I know when you just start, a magazine or something like that, it kind of takes time.
Quarterly about. Right now, I'm kind of, I had some delays with issue number 3 getting out the door. And I had some art related mishaps with I had some delays getting issue 3 out the door. And I had some art issues with number 4, but that's resolved. It's all moving forward. It's just a matter of, it's just a matter of getting through it. So we will have issue 4 is going to ship in at the beginning of July, and then issue 5 will be, I think, in the August timeframe. I have a family vacation, and I may be changing how I do fulfillment. So we'll see. And then issue 6 will be out hopefully before December, because I don't want to pay the increased postage rates. So,
well, yeah, that makes 100% sense.
Yeah.
So, John, how did you, approach, Richard or did Richard approach you to get into the, the
magazine? Anvil, they have some right before they start going with the crowdfunding for the issues. They open submissions, and I'd submitted to issues 1 and 2, and wrote a different short story for each one. And 3 was just the one that they liked the best, which I just went ahead and okay.
To be fair, on issue 2, I think you told me, you were like, I wrote this in like one evening or something like.
Well, yeah. But I mean,
it was by the seat of your pants.
I do everything by the seat of my pants, though.
True,
like all the short stories I've written have been in one night. Even Valiant Storm. It's just a matter of, do I find the inspiration for this? Because I'm a novel author. You see how thick my book is. Okay.
I was just going to ask you, how long is your short story in there?
Yeah, I don't remember. It's not that long.
I think I got right up against 6,000 words.
Yeah. So, I start getting rolling with characters and setup, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I only got 2,000 words left to resolve this whole thing. So I had to condense a lot of things down, and Valiant Storm was just this fun little idea. What if a bunch of defective clones pulled off a high-tech heist? So, that was I could make a whole book out of that short story, but writing short stories is not something that I have exercised in my writing my writing repertoire over the years. So I've looked at Anvil as a great chance to, kind of put a little bit of effort into slimming down my usual efforts. Because, us fantasy authors, good Lord, we go to write a small little book and, 110,000 words turns into 75, turns into 150. All of a sudden you've got a 5-book series on your hands. That it is what it is, that's just the stripes that our zebras are. And, you can't always change that, but
and I will say, for anybody who's thinking about submitting to Anvil, the next window opens in May. It's going to be for the month of May.
Okay.
You can find the details on anvilmagazine.com over on the submissions tab. I haven't updated it. I need to do that, but it'll be May, and rates and everything will be the same. I pay for all my fiction.
Okay.
So that's something I was talking to Kursova magazine before I was even thinking about Anvil, and he made a comment that stuck with me, which was, I could get a lot of fiction for free, but that would lower, that would lower the bar within the ecosystem and like create downward pressure on the effort and what people are willing to give out. And so it's one of those things where I was like, that's a good point. So I'm trying to make sure that money is going into this thing and it's coming back out and going to the authors and the creatives in the space. So
this is something that I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, and my only other comment, if you're thinking about submitting, the shorter your submission, the more likely I'll have be able to find a place for it, because we have over 1 million words last time. So,
1 million words for the whole
for 1 million words submitted, only space for about 50.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, you got 1 million words in that magazine?
No, that'd be a juggernaut there. That's not even a novel. That'd just be a phone book.
Yeah, I mean that's like it behind me. Like, but yeah, because the next book that's coming out from myself is a collection of short stories from characters that have been in the first 3 novels that I've written. Mostly just the side characters that people were interested in, and people who always asked about a certain character. So I'm like, all right, I'll throw a little something in there. But I have the opposite, from John. John's like, it just gets huge. Like, for me, writing the short stories, I don't know if it's because I came into fantasy through, The Last Wish and The Witcher, which is just a collection of short stories. But I tried to keep my short stories around 4,500 words, about 15. I do 3 chapters, so 15, 15, 15, and then some of them get a little bit more. But yeah, I love these anthologies, collections. So what all do you accept within your magazine? Is it comics? Is it
basically
Is it
all
poetry?
Genre fiction, and then comics? I also do, and I'm always looking for artists. So if you're an artist out there, in that same submission tab, there's a section down at the bottom for how you can send me a portfolio. I don't always reach out to new artists all the time, because I have had some bad luck with that. And Bunny, if you haven't gotten an email, I think I sent out everything. You might check your junk mail, because I've gotten targeted with junk mail. I've been hit with it because I have a .media ending on my email, and a lot of inbox filters will kick that. But anyway, so sci-fi, fantasy, all that, I'm very interested in it. I'm not really interested in romance as much, generally speaking. It's not that I'm totally opposed to it. I had a story that I almost accepted that was more romance oriented, but it was just extremely dialogue heavy, and it was over 7,000 words, and so I was kind of like,
No. Yeah.
A little bit harder of a sell. And anyway, but it's if you have questions, you can reach out to me. I try to be very responsive. I'm not always. Best way to get a hold of me is contact@ironage.media via email. So
Yeah. Well, and that, I mean, it kind of leads into the, one of the big things that's been all over the media the last, I don't know, 6 months is the rise of romantasy and, and all that. I don't mind romance in my stuff, but I'm more about fantasy romance than romance fantasy, but my wife, as you can see her in the thing, is all about the dark romance and smut and all that stuff. So I end up reading it, and it's fun. But yeah, like
I will say I have noticed that myself. I've been kind of perusing Book Talk and Bookstagram to you kind of like perusing BookTube, kind of trying to keep my finger on the pulse of what are people reading, why are they reading it, what's kind of popular, what are people kind of throwing up there for others to find. And it's almost all romantasy at this point. And yeah, there's a lot of talk about the spice and the smut over there, and some of them are funny and coy about it, and then some of them are just absolutely shameless. I'm actually quite amused by a lot of them, but you're right. Like it is dominating the conversation on those that particular book end of social media. So it's a thing. And somebody just came out with a little blog not that long ago talking about this is the current trend in traditional publishing. Odds are that's what they're going to be looking for, and it's probably going to dominate the conversation for a little while. But a lot of that is also the publishing houses kind of gearing away from what has traditionally been more men's fiction than women's. Don't get me wrong, you get the right kind of author excuse me, that knows how to appeal to both men and women, and you end up getting really really good works.
Well, I will say here, and I've said it a couple times on my other videos I've done, and I did a review on it, which is like doing like almost 1,000 views now. But Danielle L. Jensen did A Fate Inked in Blood, and it's marketed as a romantasy book, but it is a lot closer to just fantasy with romance kind of in there. And I'm like, I'll say that because a lot of men aren't the ones reading all this romantasy, obviously Sarah J. Maas and stuff. But if you are a guy and you want to dip your toes, that's probably where I would start, because I'm, like I said, I'm the weird person who I'm a glutton for punishment. So if there's stuff I normally don't read, I'll just jump head first and just get beat up a little bit by it, and then figure out if there's anything good to come of it. And that's the best one that I've seen so far. It's like a Norse-inspired, story about the Shield Maiden magic's all up in it. So I think hardcore fantasy guys can enjoy that book.
If does your wife like dark fantasy with a more adult edge with romance in it?
Oh, yeah.
Let me introduce her to her new favorite, Sarah Douglas. I'm about to drop a video on this. It's going to be an hour-long tribute to this author, and there's plenty of her to see. And I guarantee if that's the kind of stuff that she likes, she will love this. And you would probably like this too, because when I was the point I was getting to is the authors that know how to appeal to both men and women. This is one of them. Sarah Douglas is one of them. She's extremely talented in that regard. Yes, add it to your reading list. Start with the one I just showed you, The Wayfarer Redemption. You've got 6 books in that series, and then you know what? I'll save it for my video.
Yeah, don't give away your whole video.
That's most of the books back here are her books, because this is just the backdrop for the tribute video that I've been doing. This is a 4-book series called The Troy Game. God, this stuff, this is really good stuff. I feel like if she had been published now, like she would be dominating romantasy right now, because it touches on all the things that the romantasy readers love, and it's uncompromising and unflinching in its sex and violence. If you've read Game of Thrones, you can handle reading Sarah Douglas. I guarantee.
Oh yeah, I mean, it is so funny that now this may be a controversial thing to say here, but like we've been going on, but the big thing that always kind of gets like I'm not triggered, but it gets under my on my nerves a little bit is the male gaze. Like when people, when I'm like, again, just reading Greenbone Saga, I'm like, Fonda Lee has the female gaze all up in those books. She loves to write sex scenes in those books, even though that's not the main part. But every book has at least 2 or 3 in it. I'm like, it's not a man and a woman thing. It's just a people thing,
It is, and I kind of resent the folks that the people, especially the women that like to try and complain and say this is all just geared towards men. Okay, yes, if it is written by a man for other men to enjoy an adventure, there's different appeals in what some men write and other men read. But we don't go into the romance genre and start bitching about the fact that hey, they all have a shirtless guy with his abs out on the cover, and that's an unrealistic body standard. We don't go in there and try and ruin their thirst for them. I don't appreciate it when they try and come in and do the same thing and say that the male gaze is wrong. We have different things that appeal to each other, and it's fantasy for a reason, which is why I laugh when people get so bent out of shape over like boob armor, bikini armor, and as if Conan was in there rocking a full set of plate mail. I'm like, the real armor, as I always say, is plot armor. The reason that Red Sonja didn't get stabbed in the stomach with a trio of arrows is because the author didn't want her to. So, food for thought.
All right. Well, I think we're a little bit up over here. I mean, we have a ton of people on. I appreciate everybody. Let's Richard, what do you got coming up? I know you said you got the 4th magazine coming out. What's going on with your channel, your website? People can find you and all that good stuff.
All right. Well, everybody can find me on Twitter or X at Iron Age Media. Find me on YouTube at ironage.media. The website is ironage.media. No .com there. And then if you want to buy the magazine or pre-order it, it's anvilmagazine.com. I also have a Indiegogo Kickstarter up for anybody who's interested in doing it that way. There is a full catch up, and that gets you all 4 issues for this year and digital versions of the first 2 issues as well over there. So if Anvil Magazine sounds like something that you want to be a part of and want to jump on, you can get it through Indiegogo for a good price there. I am going to be on A Drink with Crazy's channel for Iron Age Nights. That's where we talk to indie creators every Friday. Oh, and then on Saturday, I'm doing a special stream. This is something I'm going to start doing. I'm not sure how often, but a little bit more regularly. And that's taking a look at a popular franchise, looking at what's made it popular and how then later I'm going to be looking at how that can be incorporated into an indie property, and maybe even just doing like a little prototype demonstration of that with some other creatives. This Saturday is going to be Warhammer 40K, since it's topical, and I'll be on there with Mage Leader and possibly some other folks. So
that is excellent.
Yeah, John, I've got a lot of things going on currently.
Yeah, I was like, you got a lot of irons in the.
Yeah, I know. It's something I say unironically, and then my wife has rolled her eyes at me enough times that now I'm like self-aware of it. So,
all right, John, what do you got going on?
Right now, the Black Crown has been out for a couple months now, and it's sold pretty well. I am happy to announce that before too long, I will have a hardcover edition of it.
Nice.
You look out for an announcement coming, and that's going to be a special particular video. You guys are going to be tickled pink when you see what I got coming down the road. Next week, I'm hoping the tribute video to Sarah Douglas that I got coming out. It's going to be over an hour long, and I've been wanting to do more long form videos. So keep an eye out for that. JR, I'm going to send you the link to give to your wife once that drops, because This may put. I don't want this author's work to get obscure, so that's why I did the tribute. And she wrote some really good stuff, and I kind of want her to be remembered for what she wrote. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2011 from ovarian cancer. But I'm cranking away on my own books as well. I've once the submissions for Anvil open up, I'm gonna probably work on another submission for that. I got really busy in the last 4 months with my own book release. I hadn't released a whole heck of a lot, but I'm working on Age of Adventures book 2, The Lionheart, and hoping to get that out at some point this year, hopefully with a comic companion. I've got to talk to some of my comic peoples about that and see how we can make that happen. But it won't be as big as this. I promise. That's just how the story kind of come out. I know I could use this as a small weapon, a cudgel of some sort. This probably does +1 damage to half orcs if you used it in a D&D campaign. But yeah, I'm working to get that out as soon as I can. And I got the stuff that folks want to read. If everyone just wants some good fun entertainment and they want to come away from reading a book feeling good and feeling better than they did when they went in, you can catch me on my channel, YouTube. You can catch me on YouTube. You can catch me on Twitter at BLK Crown Author. I can't use my name anymore and my Twitter handle. And you can find me almost everywhere as John A. Douglas. I'm on multiple platforms: Facebook, Minds, Truth, Rumble, Odyssey. I am all over the place.
Well, that is excellent. Everybody, go out and get John's book. Go out and get Anvil magazine. While you're out there, go ahead and get one of the 3 More Than Human novels that's out there of mine. And I would love to have you guys back on. Maybe we can do this occasionally and talk about the newest things happening in the indie scene, because I am all about spreading the love and getting more attention to everybody.
It's great how much Richard got to talk this video without Royce constantly interrupting him too.
It's a minor miracle. We'll have Royce on, and I can take a break next time.
Yeah, maybe we'll get Royce on, and I've watched like 10 of his videos already since I started researching it, and he seems like a pretty fun guy. So
yes,
thank you.
Whenever his wife lets him be. So
when he's not on the honey-do list.
Yeah.
But thank you everybody who watched, and we will all see you soon.